Hi everyone, can you hear me now? How about now? Can you hear me? I hope so. Trying to talk at a normal level. Well, let's get a little closer. How about now? Well, that's great. I took everyone's advice, and my biggest complaint was that people couldn't hear me. So I went out and got a wireless microphone for my camera, and hopefully the audio will be a whole lot better in the future. I had a shotgun mic before, but it wasn't working too well. But none of this really has anything to do with today's episode. And since it's 0 degrees outside, it's December 11th, 2019. I think today what we'll do is go inside where it's warm, and I'll talk to you a little bit about my experience working for a commercial beekeeper. Say hi. Say hi. Yeah? Good boy. Let's go. Well, welcome back to my warm basement. I had enough of that below 0 temperature outside. So today what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about my experiences in commercial beekeeping. I'm going to try not to slam it too much. Most of you have followed me for quite a while, and you've seen my videos from when I started working for a commercial migratory beekeeper. And I use that term migratory, so I want you to pay attention to that. Anyways, I started back in beginning of May working for a commercial beekeeper. When I hired on, they told me that it was probably going to be the most physical job I've ever had in my entire life, and they were not incorrect, not one little bit. But at now I worked all summer long, and at the end of September I decided that I had had enough, and I informed them that I wasn't going to be traveling with them down to Florida with the bees. And so I sort of gave my notice, and I worked until about the 3rd week of October. It was a very, very, very physical job for me. The distinction between being a commercial beekeeper and working for a commercial beekeeper is this. I had to work very, very hard, but I didn't get any benefits to it. I also didn't have any of the headaches associated with owning your own commercial operation. I didn't lose any sleep at night worrying about my bees, my hives, my apiaries, my bee production, labor, whatever. That was never entered into the equation for me. I was just a laborer, strictly and succinctly. If you saw my videos over the summer, you saw that, long hours, working to exhaustion, getting stung, extreme heat, just not a fun time. And by the time you wake up and you're no longer exhausted and you're no longer, the swelling goes down from your hands, you talk yourself into that wasn't so bad. I can do this. And I can't tell you how many times that I came home at night thinking, I can't do this anymore. And after you do that for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, that's pretty much, you kind of convince yourself that that's it. Especially at my age. I'm 54 years old. I wanted to try it. I really enjoyed doing what I used to do, and I'm back actually doing it now. It's just that my business fell off. That's the only reason that I went and did this work, but business has picked up, so that's good. Regardless. Anyways, I just wanted to go over some of the things that I kind of learned doing commercial migratory beekeeping and some of the pitfalls that that can happen during this. If you want to be a commercial beekeeper, my advice to you is don't. My advice to you is be a sideline beekeeper. If you're a hobby beekeeper and you want to get bigger, then get bigger slow. Get bigger slow and see how it is. Be a sideliner, you know. If you want to get up to 100 hives, do it. Do not get over your skis on your bees, and do not think in terms of getting big. One of the problems that I noticed when I was working there at this operation, and just based on the phone calls, listening to, you know, one-sided of the conversation on phones, commercial beekeepers chat with each other a lot on the phone during the day, you know, driving back and forth from apiaries. A lot of them are in kind of the same boat, and misery kind of loves company. They all like to know how the flow is going for them, and, you know, how labor is, and this, that, and the other thing, and what, you know, is, you know, 2 brood boxes working versus 1.5, or versus single brood box, or you know, how many honey supers do you have on a single hive? Blah blah blah. They chat about this stuff on a constant basis, or who is too close to whom, as far as the apiaries. That's a big issue with the commercial beekeepers. They really don't like anybody else in their territory, and even though they're on land with permission from a private landowner, they don't own the land. A lot of them think they do, and when they see another commercial beekeeper, maybe on the next, you know, section over, they get pissed about that. They're like, you know, you're right on top of me. You know, you can't do. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, there's millions of flowers out there. It's not that big of a deal. The biggest issue that I saw that commercial beekeepers run into is they try to get too big too fast. When I hired on, I was told that the operation wanted to get up to 5, 6, 7,000 hives. That was their goal going forward. And they had about 2,400 hives at that point in time when I hired on. Now, those numbers are impressive, absolutely meaningless to the everyday Joe backyard beekeeper, other than they sound impressive, to really understand what it takes to take care of that many hives. And I was right in that group. I mean, I was like, it sounds impressive, and that sounds like great goals. And you know, it's like, if you work for us for 4 or 5 years, you can make $80,000 a year, and you know, this, that, and the other thing. You know, when we get up to 7,000 hives, and I'm like, damn, you know, this is great. At least great potential, anyways. So, anyways, one of the things that I noticed is that they have a hard time keeping labor. Beekeepers do. I mean, think about it. Who wants to lift 80-pound boxes all day long, 10-hour days, in sweltering heat in a bee suit, and get stung all the time? That's a very, very limited group of people to pick from. Generally, what they end up getting are young adults, young men. Some have troubled backgrounds, whether it be drugs or whatever, trying to clean their life up a little bit, but don't have a lot of options by employers, simply because a lot of employers drug test nowadays. Or they get, you know, maybe some students, kids that you know, don't really like high school very well, so they drop out. But they have a lot of gifts as far as physical strength, and really, that's, as far as a beekeeping laborer, that's really all it takes. Is you need strength and stamina and the ability to deal with the heat and getting stung. And you know, when your options are limited, well, that's the job you take. I took it because, well, You know, I had an interest in beekeeping. My business had fallen off, so I kind of needed a job quick, and this just seemed logical to me. It was a very, very, very physical job for me. I'm 54 years old, I'm not gonna lie. I was probably a little bit out of my wheelhouse as far as the physicality was concerned. But I did do everything that everybody else did, and I did it all summer long. Not without injury, I guess you could say. My joint still 8 weeks later after I quit, my elbow is still, I can't straighten it out. And I think I tore some, I don't know, ligaments in my arm or muscle in my arm or what, I don't know what it is, but it took about 6 weeks before I could sleep at night without pain. And now even if I lift something heavy, it hurts for a long time right afterwards. But it's nothing that I can't live with. But getting back to getting over your skis, being a commercial beekeeper and getting too big too quickly, the thing that I learned the most is commercial beekeepers, like I said, they have this eye on bee having and not beekeeping, and having numbers to produce as much honey as they can. And the bees are a commodity. They're not anything to be really coddled over or cared for or anything like that. They're a resource. Having that many colonies with very few workers stretched over an hour-and-a-half area, between apiaries, 64 colonies in an apiary, 45 apiaries, 2,400 hives. I didn't quite do the math there, but you get the idea. Sometimes we didn't get to apiaries. We'd get there, we'd do our work, but we didn't get back for a month. And that's because there's just not enough time in the day to get everything done you want, to have that many hives. And by the time that we were finished, we had done all this work for all these apiaries, but we hadn't gotten to them. And there was no really set schedule, that we gotta treat, we gotta go through all these apiaries, and we gotta run mite counts, and then we gotta do mite checks. When I was there, we did mite counts, a mite wash, twice, if I remember right. That was from May through October. Now we treated, and what they did was flash treatments with a product that's might be illegal, and I don't really know, but it was very cheap and ineffective, effective, but as a flash treatment, and it's something that you have to, like oxalic acid vapor, you have to treat more than just one time, because all it does is take care of the phoretic mite load. In other words, the mites that are currently on the bees, not whatever is under the cap brood. So, like I told you before, we didn't get some apiaries for 4 weeks. Well, we'd treat, and then we wouldn't get back to her for 4 weeks. Well, at the end of the summer, those 2,400 hives, they lost 25% of the hives. This photo right here is of a truckload of dead outs from just 3 apiaries. And let me tell you, when the boss sees something like that, he gets in a big depression. When you get to an apiary and 25% of your hives, some apiaries had 50% or more, just because mite bombs went off all over the apiary. And they kind of shrugged it like, everybody loses, 25%, in a year. That might be so. And 25% might be the number in the wintertime to lose. But during a honey flow, to lose 25% of your production hives is criminal, in my opinion. I couldn't believe that. So what I'm getting at is they had more hives than they could care for. And if they would have just had a plan and said, nope, we have 3 guys. We can do 1,500 hives, and we can only do this if our apiaries are stretched from this spot, out here, maybe 40 minutes away. We had apiaries that were an hour and a half away. Let me tell you, you can do 2 to 3 apiaries a day when everything is an hour and a half away. That just eats up a day like you wouldn't believe. And there's only so many days in the summertime, and you just can't get to take care of all your apiaries like you really should have. If we'd have dropped it down to 1,500 hives and kept those hives healthy and only had a 5-10% loss, maybe, the honey production from all of those, just think about all those colonies right there. If they would have all made honey, even if they only made 40, 50 pounds apiece, and that's it. Think about how much honey was lost because of your inability to care for your bees. That was my biggest rub working for it. I did my best. I know the owner's, son, I know he did his best. And let me tell you, the kid worked way more hours than I did. I mean, he worked weekends when I didn't have to. And so I'm really not putting it on them. I just think what I'm putting on them is poor planning. It wasn't poor work ethic or anything like that. These guys, they work their ass off, and most commercial beekeepers work their ass off. It's not that they're lazy. I just think they get they get ahead of their skis. They get over their skis. And you never want to get that. You don't ever want to get there. Who wants to lose 25% of their hives during a honey flow? Up here in the north, when we lose 25% of our hives, it's in the wintertime. It's usually due to mites, but it's in the wintertime, but we're not losing out on, honey production because of it. We start out in the spring and we try to rebuild our numbers and get the honey that we want, but you never lose that many hives in the summertime. So that was my big rub, and that was my big lesson that I learned doing commercial beekeeping. That, and like I said, I work for a migratory beekeeper, and moving bees absolutely 100% sucks. And I say that because you are stressing out the bees like you wouldn't believe, moving hives all the time. It's one thing to have them in the shed in the wintertime and move them out to your yards in the summertime. There's nothing really too awful about that. The bees are out there. When they start growing, they're not stressed at all. But when you have them down in Florida for, let's say, let's say for 3 months, then you load them up onto semis and you ship them off to California, and they're there for a month. Then you ship them back to Florida, and then you put them back out in yards. And then you load them up from those yards, and then you send them up to Wisconsin, and they're unloaded in Wisconsin into a bee yard, and then you pull the hives in those bee yards. And when I say bee yard, I mean an unloading yard, which has like 600 hives in it, and then you grab those 600 hives, a truckload at a time, and then you drop them off in individual apiaries. That stresses bees out like you wouldn't believe, and you're losing bees all the time. Commercial beekeepers, they don't care. That stuff doesn't even enter the equation. It's all about the numbers, and that's the biggest thing that bugged me about migratory commercial beekeeping. Now, if you look at somebody like, let's just do an example, Ian Stepler up there in Canada. He's not a migratory beekeeper. He's just a beekeeper. He houses his bees in the wintertime in a shed. When springtime comes and it's ready, He loads them up on a truck and he puts them out in his yards, and they essentially stay there all summer long unless he has a, let's say, a better yard to move them to get them to produce a little bit more honey for him. But he's not stressing his bees out. He also doesn't sit there and go, well, I got 1,500 this year and I want 3,000 next year, so I'm going to do that many splits and I'm going to, increase. And he wouldn't have enough labor, time in the day, or any. He works hard enough as it is. He has a plan, he has a number, and he is satisfied with the production of his honey, and he cares for the bees that he has, and he has the ability to care for the bees that he has, and he has a plan of attack every single day, and it's laid out in the spring as to how he's going to do it. You also have to make, obviously, adjustments on the fly for weather, but you do have a plan of attack for everything you do. For us, the same guys that did take off honey, cared for the bees out in the field, also did the honey extraction. So we're in the honey house doing all the honey extraction. Nobody can be out in the field, taking more honey off. So like I said, we had to do a week of pulling honey and storing it in the shed, and then we do a week of extraction, and then we go back out and pull more honey and bring it in the shed, and then extract more honey. And that was monotonous, and I'm going to tell you. And while you're extracting honey in the shed, you're not pulling honey off the yards, and you're entering a dearth, and now the bees have nothing else to consume, so they start eating all the honey. So then you go back out there, and all of a sudden you're like, man, these freaking hives are really light. Well, that's because you didn't have the resources to pull your honey in a timely fashion. So if you just say, this is my plan. I want, let's say you're a sideliner, 50 hives. This is what, I'm all by myself. I can handle 50 hives plus my full-time job, but I can manage 50 hives, and I can afford to feed them, and I can take I have the time available to get feed on them when I pull the honey, and to do mite treatments when I'm supposed to do mite treatments to keep them all healthy. Don't look and go, I want 500 hives. You're going to find yourself in a world of hurt, and you're going to be counterproductive. And that's essentially what I learned in beekeeping, is that it's very, very, in commercial migratory beekeeping, is that it's very, very easy to become counterproductive. Like I said, the kid I worked for worked his tail off, worked more hours than I did, but he didn't have to, is all I'm kind of getting at. So that is my takeaway from working for a commercial beekeeping operation, a migratory commercial beekeeping operation. And like I said, from my perspective, it sounded like a lot of the ones in our region kind of operated the same way. Tried to, just overextended themselves a little bit too much. Just my opinion. Again, just my opinion, just my perspective. I'm not I'm probably beat on my lapel mic here. I'm not an expert. I learned. What did I learn? What else did I learn? What skills did I pick up to help me in beekeeping? I'm going to be honest with you, not a lot. Bad habits of not treating hives and things like that I picked up. But how to handle a hive and get in and out very, very quickly, I learned how to do that. I learned how to adjust my frames. I learned that I kind of like the idea of having frame feeders and 8 frames in the hive rather than buckets on top. I kind of like that idea, so I took that from it. I learned how to operate a skidster. Well, two different types of skidsters, actually, Bobcat and a I think it's called a Gale skidster. So that was kind of, I do like that I learned how to operate a skidster, and I'm able to pick up a pallet full of boxes without dumping them over. I already knew how to operate a forklift, so that really wasn't it. I learned about, a lot about extracting honey and in the commercial, and I also learned that I will never eat a bottle of honey from a commercial outfit, ever. Word of advice, if you're gonna have honey, stick to the hobby beekeepers, because I saw what gets mixed in with all that commercial honey, and it's not for me. Now, it's perfectly legal and safe. I mean, you know, if you ever saw what goes into when they take milk down, and what gets into milk before it's pasteurized, it'd make Billy Goat puke, actually. So they're allowed to have a little bit of stuff in there, I guess you could say, but all the bees and all the larvae and hive beetles larvae and stuff that kind of gets shoved through the operation. That's the kind of honey you sell, and you put on Honey Nut Cheerios or something like that they use, or in baking for honey baked hams and things like that. That's not something that you really want to have bottled. So stick with your local honey from your local hobby beekeepers. If it's more expensive, buy it. I can't imagine what's in Chinese honey. I don't even want to fathom to think about it. So that's what I learned. I learned that I'm never going to be consuming a bottle of commercial honey in my life. And like I said, perfectly legal. Nothing bad about it. It's just stuff gets in to the honey, just like stuff gets into the milk, and it's just you're allowed impurities, I guess you can say. What else did I learn about the commercial operation? I learned how to strap down a truck. Nothing that's going to actually help me out in the hobby beekeeping area. One of the things that I learned and I'll take with me is a process called undersupering. And essentially what it is you've got your brood box, your queen excluder, and you put maybe 1 or 2 honey supers on. You come back in a couple weeks, and the bees have started filling up those 2 supers, and maybe they got the top one full, and maybe the bottom one is half full, or so. What we do is we pull off those 2 hives and put maybe 1 or 2 more, just depending on the colony size, supers. But we put them on directly over those brand new empty supers, directly over the queen excluders, and then put the heavier, full honey supers on top of that, and that's called undersupering. And the theory behind that is that the bees they don't have very far to travel, so they'll start filling up those empty combs, and they'll leave the stuff that's on top and filled and capped alone. And I wasn't really sure whether I bought that or not. And the boss had sent us out. He was back doing other chores back at the shop, and he would send me and one of the laborers out, or me and a couple of the other laborers out, and to super some apiaries. And I was sort of running the crew. I mean, I guess you could say I was the lead guy, just probably because I was the oldest. But I thought about it, and I decided on my own to undersuper half of the apiary. I think it was 64 hives. So 32 we undersupered, and 32 I over supered just to see if the bees would build out and these were, and the funny thing was is that these were, this was not drawn out comb. This was just foundation that we were putting on because we just had run out of comb. And I just wanted to see if the bees would work on it. And what we found, and I came back and I told Tim exactly what I did, and he kind of thought about it for a second. And he goes, maybe not a bad idea to try it, you know, as an experiment, just on one apiary, to see once and for all, is that the case? Do they build it out? You know, will they build wax and whatnot faster if it's closer to the queen excluder than if you were to over super? Oh, when we came back, probably 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, we did this apiary, and for certain, we found that they had drawn and filled those empty supers that were directly over the brood box fuller and faster than the ones we over supered for whatever reason. Like I said, I just took the apiary and I split it in half, and it was the same apiary, so the bees were, you know, essentially foraging on the same nectar sources out there, and that's what the result was. So that was one good thing, probably the best thing that I took from my entire experience over the summer beekeeping, was under supering. So from now on, even though it's more work, it really is. I mean, pulling off heavy supers and then sticking ones on is labor intensive. But if you are concerned at all about your yield, about getting your comb drawn, I suggest that you under super. So that was a really good experiment that we ran, something I learned and something I'll take with me. Another thing I learned is that fume boards suck. And if you don't know what a fume board is, I suggest maybe that you pull up a YouTube video and watch what using a fume board is. But it is the most time-consuming method of getting bees removed from a honey super that I can imagine that there is. Essentially what they are is a sort of like a shim. It's probably about 1.5 inches, and it's the size of a box, about 1.5 inches deep, and it's got a cover on it with a felt on the inside. And what you do is you spray this product. A lot of it's called Bee Go. There's other names for products that are out there, but the stuff we use is called Bee Go. And you just spray it on there, and it smells absolutely, eyes tear up. That's how, if you're downwind of it. No joke, it's horrible. The bees can't stand it for the most part. But anyways, you put these fume boards on top of the hive, and if you don't leave a little bit of ventilation, you can actually make the bees sick, and they'll all of a sudden, they won't move at all. But regardless, so the whole idea behind this, you put it on top of the top, so you take your lid off, put it on top of the top super, and drive the bees down and essentially out of the front entrance, or at least down into the brood boxes. That's where you want to get them. And these things, it takes 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the strength that you sprayed this stuff on. It depends on how warm it is outside. Usually when you're pulling honey super, it's cold out, so it doesn't work near as effectively. Not all the bees leave these supers anyways. It only drives the bees out of one box at a time. So if you've got 4 or 5 supers on, or 3 or 4 supers on, you set this on, you wait 10 minutes, you come back, crack the hive, there's bees still in it, crack the hive, you pull this 80-pound box off, there's still bees in it, so you're shaking it and you're banging these bees out on the ground, and they're flying everywhere, and they're lost, and they're a little dazed and confused because this Bee Go has really screwed them up. So they're stressed beyond belief. You're literally banging these freaking 80-pound boxes, and your arms are just tired as hell trying to bang the bees out of these boxes. Then you walk over and you set this freaking honey on a pallet, which may be, 20 yards away or 15 yards away, and you got guys coming and going, and maybe you're in your way. Bees are in the air everywhere, disoriented, pissed off, you name it. It is what it is. The bees are so disoriented because you're taking the towers down so far that the ones that are remaining high that you haven't gotten to yet, that's where all the bees are clinging to, because the foragers are coming back and they don't have a clue where the hell to land, because their visual cue, this hive that was 6 boxes high, is not there anymore. It's now 2 boxes high, and their vision is lost because the whole apiary is dropped down to nothing. So you'll see a couple of hives left, and they'll just be covered with bees, and because nobody knows where to go. All the branches around surrounding are full of bees because they're disoriented and they don't know what is what. The bees are so stressed out, and like I said, you're banging these bees down, and you're not getting them all out, and you got all these bees on, and robbing is happening like you wouldn't believe. And so you're putting covers on or lids on all these hives, and then you're carrying a box, and then you got to pull off a lid off of the pallet and stick your box on quick. So you're trying to balance all that, and it's just, if you ever watched an Ian Stepler video, he comes in, he puts in a clearing board, and then he leaves, and then he comes back maybe a day or two later, and all the bees are cleared out. They have gone down, they do it quietly and they slowly, and they move down. He comes back 2 days later, he pulls his hives off with his little, and he just sets it on the truck, and he's in and out of a yard in 25, 30 minutes with very, very little robbing. This is not what this is. And I took a video of this, and unfortunately, every time I'd set my video up, it'd be so hot out, where I set it, my camera would stop working, because I wanted to get a time lapse of when you started in just a few bees to this absolute madness of bees flying around everywhere. And they're all over the truck, and they're all over when you're loading the bees on, all these honey things on the truck, and the bees are all over it, and they're in the cab, and they're all over you. They're hanging on you. It is just an absolute nightmare, and it is nothing that you ever want to do. But anyways, what I was getting at was, it also takes us sometimes 3 hours to clear a yard. Now, like I said, Ian clears a yard in 20, 30 minutes, same size yard. And it's just the way that you go about doing things inefficiently that can make or break you. We spent so much time in a single yard, we couldn't get to very many yards. And then, like I said, we're extracting honey. It's just, they didn't hire anybody else to extract honey. So, your labor force is now taken out of the field and now extracting honey, while the bees are back consuming the honey that you still have on other hives. So very, very inefficient, very, very inefficient. And from what I understand, a lot of the beekeepers are doing this method, and I just can't imagine why. Now, clearing boards, unless you have a mechanical lift that can lift up a stack of hives, and you slide a clearing board in, and you have 64 clearing boards, to do an apiary or 2 or 3 or whatever like that, that's an investment that you got to make in your operation. So I guess I understand that, if they'd had us out there lifting all these hives, because we'd have had to lift 4 or 5 honey supers off, put a clearing board on, and then put it back on. But there has got to be a better way of doing things. And like I said, you're going to be a commercial honey operation. You got to take it easy on your labor force, because I understood finally why they couldn't keep labor around for very long. And that's one of the reasons that I quit. I'm just like, this is just absolutely ridiculous, the way things were being done. And I'm not putting anything on them. Like I said, my bosses worked harder than I did. So that's neither here nor there. It was just, there's ways to be efficient, and there's ways to not be efficient. And like I said, it just wasn't for me. So that's what I learned from the commercial beekeeping operation. If that's something that you want to do, may God be with you, and I wish you nothing but the best. My opinion, and this is only my opinion, is stick to being a hobby and or a sideline beekeeper, because there's nothing wrong with being a sideline beekeeper. I think a lot of guys can do it and do it well. And I think, you have a full-time job, having 50 hives, even 100 hives, I think it can be done with the right help, especially if you might have a little bit of family to help you too. So that's it in a nutshell. I hope you got a little bit out of it. I know I get long-winded. I didn't write anything down, so I'm kind of shooting from the hip on a lot of this, and I probably forgot a lot that I didn't like about it. But we all learn from our experiences in life, and that's something I'm never going to forget, that's for sure. So until next time, happy beekeeping and stay warm. Merry Christmas.